Well, we start off tonight's show in South Africa, where local media is reporting that a high-level meeting involving top banking executives and the country's finance minister over potential U.S. sanctions is taking place, or rather took place. Now, Sowetan, which is a daily newspaper, said that their conversation focused on an American bill that, of course, is targeting African National Congress leaders over South Africa's ties with Russia and China. The report indicated fears of restrictions on South Africa's access to the SWIFT Interbank payment network, a move that could cripple the country's economy. Now, while the South African Treasury engages its counterparts in the U.S. to ease these tensions, local banks are now bracing for the impact. Of course, tensions with the U.S. have escalated since January, with the Trump administration challenging South Africa over much of its domestic and foreign policies. South Africa's top banking executives and Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana have held discussions on the potential fallout if Washington were to impose sanctions on the country. That is according to a report by Sowetan on Monday. The talks, which took place at a recent Banking Association of South Africa board meeting, reportedly centered on those concerns that, of course, U.S. lawmakers are advancing that bill. Well, let's move on now to get more details on this. We're now joined by Sandile Swana, a governance expert and also a political analyst. Great to have you on the show with us. Now, of course, we have seen SWIFT sanctions devastate other economies around the world. Countries like Russia and Iran have reported devastating impacts to their GDPs. South Africa's economy, on the other hand, is a little bit more diversified. So give us a sense of just how vulnerable you think South Africa is to these sanctions.
Thank you so much. The first thing is that when you read the bill itself, it's certainly quite narrowly focused on certain leaders of the African National Congress. So it's not sanctions that would affect the nation as a whole. Number two, you are quite correct in saying that our economy is diversified. I mean, some of our bankers that you've referenced here actually reported in the past 10 days that they haven't seen much impact of even the trade war itself on the banking accounts of their clients, who are doing international trade. And what is diversified is that actually, if you aggregate the European Union is our second largest trade partner. And number one is China, number three is the US. And the US is actually quite a small portion of our international trade. So there are certain aspects of that. There are certain regions that will be affected: the Cape, the Western Cape, the Eastern Cape, and the Northern Cape. But broadly, the South African economy is largely immune from this.
But what happens going forward if we do see those sanctions kick in and we do see South Africa sort of kicked out of that SWIFT system? Do you think that there is legitimate worry, given that we're seeing leaders meeting today? And also, I'd like to get a sense of whether you think there is enough to cushion the country in terms of the deals it has with regional blocs like the AFCFTA.
What has been said in a number of sectors, what the reports we've got from Trade and Industry, our Department of Trade and Industry, barring the sanctions, let's just talk about the tariff wars that have been going on, is that by and large, those issues are largely catered for in terms of the risk diversification. So the issue of the SWIFT system is a remote risk at this point in time. It's not something that can happen. However, if it were to happen, it is not as if there are no alternatives entirely.
Right. Now, it is interesting because we are hearing that U.S. lawmakers have advanced this bill that is basically reviewing bilateral ties with South Africa. Now, we don't know when this bill could be passed. We're hearing pretty soon. But looking at the cards on the table, how likely is it that the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act, which is what the bill is called, Do you think that will pass the House of Reps, given that it's gone this far? And how do you see it impacting other areas like trade, military cooperation, and of course, overall diplomatic engagements with South Africa? Because that bill is a reality.
The bill is a reality, correct? The other realities are that the very same people, the three nations that are causing this tension, at least the three plus Israel, number 4, which is Iran, China, and Russia. Trump himself is very busy negotiating with these nations. It can happen that they strike a deal, and then those tensions take a different form. If Trump has identified us on a serious note as an enemy, then military cooperation cannot be there, for example, one of the things you've listed there. However, even in the height of these trade wars that have been going on, our minerals are traveling well to the United States, platinum and so on and so forth, without any trouble. Trump wants those minerals, and the Americans have made a lot of investments here. So I don't think that they will keep the bill, and the act actually is probably going to be an act in hand in case that they need to use a stick rather than carrots. But the dynamics to me are that we're unlikely to get there in the shorter term.
I certainly like your optimism, but one thing President Trump has been known for is being quite unpredictable. And I'd like to get your take on this, because some believe that decisions like this mark a significant turning point when it comes to U.S. diplomacy. We're seeing sort of the use of financial infrastructure to enforce the U.S. political agenda. What are your thoughts, not just when it comes to South Africa, but in terms of the U.S. agenda or approach overall, globally?
Yes, I mean, we've seen the brutalization of Canada, which many people have regarded as a fairly harmless nation, but the U.S. has really hit them hard. So I am not naive to think that a lot of harm could come our way. However, remember that the BRICS countries have been making preparations for this eventuality. The leaders from Brazil, China, Russia, and so on of the BRICS countries have made preparations for the weaponization of the American dollar and its financial infrastructure. So the thing about it is that regardless of what the US administration does, whether they impose whatever penalties to South Africa, all that it will do, it will strengthen our resolve to be part of the alternative payment systems, part of alternative trade routes and trade deals around the world. And those are realistic.
Right. Well, I'd certainly love to continue that conversation with you, but we have run out of time. Many thanks for those great insights. That, of course, was Sandile Swana, a governance expert and also a political analyst, joining us there from South Africa. Now, South Africa says it is continuing to look for more leverage in its trade negotiations with the U.S. Earlier this month, the Trump administration placed a 30% tariff on imports from South Africa, and that's placed the future of many sectors, including agriculture, in serious jeopardy. Now, subsequent bilateral talks have been unable to resolve this issue, but officials say that they're now looking at options in other markets.
The South African agriculture sector contributes 3% to the GDP of the country and also contributes 5.8% to employment, general employment in South Africa. So it's a very important sector for our country, and the imposition of 30% tariff has got an impact of the exports that we are having, especially in terms of citrus, in terms of wines. We're also looking at a trade diversification strategy that would ensure that our products are going into different areas. If we get markets, then we will be able to lessen the impact of the 30% tariffs by the US.